Welcome to Stillspeakpod. This is an update on the Gabby Petito case. I did not do one yesterday because I wanted to do a video on the body cam footage. I wanted to revisit that. So I did so, and I told you that I'd come back today to give you an update. So this is mostly about yesterday, and I'll include anything that's happened this morning since it is about noon. There's still not a whole lot going on. Yesterday, no searches were found to be taking place at the Carlton Reserve or at the Fort DeSoto campground that Dog the Bounty Hunter felt that Brian may have been at. And I played the audio of Dog the Bounty Hunter speaking about how he had a tip that the parents had camped at that site. We knew they went camping because the across the street neighbors, the Guthrie's, had told us that roughly about a week ago. We just didn't know where they had went camping, so now we know where it was because Roberta's name, that's Brian's mother, is on the check-in logs, and the media got a hold of the logs and they were able to confirm this. And when the neighbors first mentioned camping, I came on here and I said it seemed to me that it would probably be Labor Day weekend. Well, the logs showed the 1st to the 3rd and then the 6th through the 8th, which of course would be very sketchy, right? Because that would mean that you went camping for 3 days, you came home for 3 days, and then you went back for 3 days. But then the laundry's lawyer, Stephen Bertolino, came out with a statement saying that they had reservations for the 1st through the 3rd, but that they had canceled it and only went the 6th through the 8th. The 6th was Labor Day, so it was Monday, then Tuesday, and Wednesday. So this means that it was 2 days prior to Gabby's family contacting members of the family asking about Gabby and Brian's whereabouts. And it was 6 days after returning from this camping trip that Brian allegedly, according to his parents, left their home and did not return and is still quote-unquote missing. Dog claimed that 3 people checked in on the 6th and only 2 left on the 8th. And I said the issue here for me is that Northport Police has said multiple times that they saw Brian at the home on first contact on the 11th. And they also said they were 100% sure he was at the home at some point. And I keep saying this, and I hate to keep saying it, but I'm still seeing people say that the police have never said they saw Brian, and that's just not true. They did say that. And the laundry's lawyer claimed that he spoke to Brian on speakerphone along with his parents on the 13th. So I don't think he would lie about that and help Brian hide. And risk his own career. That doesn't make much sense to me. But I believe law enforcement even further because when her parents filed the report of her being missing, at that point, her family didn't know that Brian and the van had come back without her. One set of parents lives about 2 hours away from Northport, and the other is all the way in Long Island. If they lived closer, they could have gone to the home and they would have seen for themselves that the van was in the driveway. So when Northport Police went to the home, initially they might have been considering that this is a big miscommunication thing and that both Gabby and Brian wouldn't be there. But then they pull up and the van is there, right? And that's a red flag. This van's here. Okay. The next thought in the cop's mind might have been maybe they came back and she's just not answering her parents, right? So he knocks on the door. And the parents hand him or her the lawyer's number. So you would think at this point, this officer would be like, okay, wait a minute. The van's here. Her mother clearly doesn't know where her daughter is. This dude's handing me a lawyer's phone number. So you would think that this would add up in his brain rather quickly and he would be looking inside the home to see if he can see if Brian is there, whether in the living room or the kitchen or wherever, right? So it makes sense to me that they would see him, right? Or to make sure that Gabby wasn't inside, to look inside to see if she wasn't there. I'm not saying they went in. I'm saying just looking behind the parents when they had this interaction to exchange the lawyer's number. So this makes sense to me. And I don't believe that anybody else lives there or currently lives there. Actually, I know they don't because we've been watching the home nonstop. So I don't think this is like the cop was just confused and he saw somebody else that looked like Brian. Now, I said yesterday that this doesn't mean that Brian did not go to Fort DeSoto campground again after the 11th. It was a campground he was familiar with. There was a picture of him behind bars next to Gabby at a fort near Fort DeSoto, hence the name Fort DeSoto. And he would likely know this layout and area. And, there are areas where there's a lot of activity, so you would get noticed, but there are other areas, and there's also islands connected to it that you can travel between. So, it's possible. It's possible he's actually out there because it's something familiar. And I mentioned yesterday that he could have entered the Carlton Reserve, made his way through the reserve, and came out on the other side in Venice before somehow getting from Venice to Fort DeSoto, whether on foot over the course of a few days or using an Uber and just putting on a hat and a mask because, hello, COVID. And it's roughly about an hour car drive from Venice to Fort DeSoto. And maybe, when he went there with his parents, he alone was basically scoping out the area and making a plan in the event that cops would show up to his home eventually, right? Because he knows that that's going to come at some point. I don't believe he didn't leave with his parents on the 8th personally. It makes more sense to me that he did leave because of what law enforcement said. It also makes sense that he would be, if he's traveling while he's on this vanishing escapade, that he would be traveling between places at night in the dark. We have to keep in mind that he allegedly left on Tuesday the 14th, and so he had all day Tuesday, he had all day Wednesday, he had all day Thursday, he had all day Friday, and that gives him a head start. We've talked about this multiple times, and they didn't start looking in the reserve until Saturday, and they looked on the Northport side of the reserve on Saturday and Sunday, and then they didn't search for him on Monday because they were executing a search warrant at his home, and then they went back to the Carlton Reserve on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the Venice side of the reserve to look for him, and then on Friday they went back to the Northport side of the reserve, and then this weekend they were mostly doing searches by air, and they said that the water levels had risen. On Monday, they said that they had scaled back and were doing more targeted searches based on intelligence. Yesterday was 2 weeks since he allegedly took off. And in that 2-week window, he could have gotten rather far. And if he's somewhat smart, or he had hatched a plan prior to the cops even coming to his home on the 11th, then it would make sense that he, would have this plan to go somewhere and travel at night and use the time that he had that nobody was looking for him to his benefit. And when cops were looking on the Northport side of the reserve, he may have already, because it had been already 4 days, been on the Venice side of the reserve. And when the cops finally went over to the Venice side days later, he may have already been out of the reserve. Like he just walked through the reserve to the other side. Pinellas County came out and said that they weren't doing any searches and they were not aware of any confirmed sightings of Brian. To Dog, the bounty hunter's credit, he didn't actually say that there was a confirmed sighting of Brian at DeSoto campground. He had said that it was confirmed they had camped there, and he also said that 3 went in and only 2 came out. That was not really something that, I don't know how he would know that, or if there was surveillance or what have you. We'll have to see. But so, of course, no, there's no confirmed sightings of Brian, at least not yet, in Fort DeSoto. So, of course, they're not going to be searching for him. And the thing is that Fort DeSoto is on the west coast of Florida, and it is several islands off the coast. And so this campground is also connected to a beach. And it can actually legit mean that if he did go there, that he's like sitting out on the beach wearing this big floppy hat to cover his bald head and eyeballs, and is drinking a beer, sitting by himself, and nobody is even noticing him. I know that sounds insane, but it's true. You may think that everybody is out there spending their days trying to spot, Brian Laundrie, but the reality is not everybody is. And if you're out camping and vacationing and enjoying the beach, I'm sure your mind isn't on Brian Laundrie or to look for Brian Laundrie. I mean, come on. I went to a inlet twice in the last few weeks. I can tell you for sure that I not once looked for Brian Laundrie where I was. Okay? I just didn't. Now, the campground has like a gate and a check-in, obviously, and then designated campgrounds, and I'm not suggesting that he went in there and he checked in and he paid, and is sitting amongst all the campers. What I'm saying is that he may have gotten into this area through an unknown area, or an isolated area where he didn't have to go through the check-in process. And he is there just in an isolated area. This is obviously his first time on the run. Well, actually, not technically, because I guess coming from Wyoming to Florida, you would consider he was running, right? Well, this is not his first. I mean, yeah, we can count that, right? We can count Wyoming to Florida was him on the run. Okay, sure. But this is his first time on the run from possibly a murder charge, right? So I'm just thinking in my head, I think he would go somewhere that's familiar to him and that he would know the area and layout and not go to somewhere unknown and take all sorts of risk being seen because he's not familiar with that area. So that's that for now. And more bouquets of flowers showed up addressed to Gabby to the Laundrie home, and they were sitting outside the front screen door as of yesterday. And it seems that people were still taking part in the idea that somebody had came up with. Gabby's 4 parents held a press conference yesterday at 1 p.m. along with their lawyer, Richard Stafford, at his office in New York. And they showed so much courage and strength, and you can definitely tell they have united over the loss of Gabby, who they refer to as Gabs, just like her Instagram account name. All 4 parents got tattoos, the same tattoos that Gabby had. And I'm going to be putting the pictures in this video. They thanked everyone, especially the FBI, and they mentioned the people behind the cameras who, do not get the credit. They urged the press to share other stories of missing people and that Gabby should not be the only one who gets attention. They also announced their foundation officially that her father had posted about that is being made in her name, and they're working out the details on who they're looking to help and if it's going to pertain to adults or missing children or both. And the press, of course, wanted to ask questions in relation to Brian, which is really not the best time because during this press conference, it was like this really positive press conference with a lot of gratitude being discussed and how they plan to carry on her name and how they're going to keep her with them. It really wasn't the time to be talking about Brian, okay? There's a time and place for everything, and this just wasn't it. So that was a little frustrating. She definitely had amazing parents. I don't know them personally, obviously, but they definitely seemed like they were amazing and loved her very much. Their pain was just so palpable, and yet they seemed so strong at the same time. They confirmed that Gabby's body did not go back to Long Island with her stepfather, Jim Schmidt. They said that she is still safe. That's what they said, safe, with authorities in Wyoming. And it was expressed how hard it was to make the decision to leave her behind. But Jim and the family had felt they needed to get back. He needed to get back to Long Island so the family could be together and grieve and celebrate her life. And we can only assume they're keeping her body so they can make sure to do every possible test and check to be sure so they can, do the final autopsy report and in the event that there is a trial. And the other day I did a video titled Why Gabby Petito, where I talked about reasons I think it gained so much attention, and I asked you to help me in spreading other people's stories. And in the video, go listen to it if you haven't, but in the video, I listed off all the good things that have come from Gabby's story blowing up, and we shouldn't be looking at this negatively, and how it helped other stories and people, and will continue to do such in the future, especially with this foundation her family is starting. Well, while Gabby was still missing, a man who had also went missing in Grand Teton, his story and face started to circulate because of Gabby. Robert Lowry was found deceased Tuesday at the base of the Teton Pass more than a month after he was last seen. The father of two had traveled from Houston to Jackson Hole, Wyoming on August 19th. And if you recall, we discussed Jackson Hole when we were going over the hitchhiker's stories in relation to Gabby's story. Lowry was 46, and he was last seen on August 20th carrying a black duffel bag and a sleeping bag, tent, and what have you, according to the Teton County Sheriff's Office. And he was said to be on the Black Cannon Trail in the Bridger Teton National Forest near Grand Teton National Park. An investigation into his whereabouts had been ongoing, but due to new tips, a search and rescue team was deployed, and they said, quote, "The widespread news coverage of the Gabby Petito search helped bring light to Lowry's case and resulted in at least 2 members of the public calling local authorities this past weekend with new information about his last possible location," unquote. That's amazing! So Gabby's story blowing up got this man's story attention, and he ended up being found. Now, obviously, it ended very tragically. He is deceased, but at least his family can have closure, and he does have children. At about 1 p.m. on Tuesday, they located his body and the duffel bag, and he was found off a trail on a steep wooded slope. It sounds like possibly this was accidental, but the manner and cause of death is unknown at this time. And the search team had looked 75 miles of land for him, so they finally found him. That's great. So to all those who were complaining about, why Gabby's story? Well, her story has now turned into other families receiving closure, and that's just amazing. And as I said in that video, we, the public, are much more powerful than the mainstream media, even if sometimes it doesn't feel that way. There was a report earlier today that there was police activity and helicopters searching for Brian in Fort DeSoto campground. But Pinellas County immediately denied the claim, and a news helicopter went up to check, and he saw nothing. Apparently, they are in the Carlton Reserve today in a much smaller search area, and they're focusing in on the water. If you recall, this reserve is 75% underwater, and this past weekend, the water levels had risen. We're not seeing any searches anywhere else, and now that the FBI has taken over, the updates and information are very few and far between, unfortunately. So it's a whole lot of nothing going on for the most part. And it seems the press reached out to some people on the logbooks for the Fort DeSoto campground because they had received the unredacted list. And so it seems that they called one of the people who were near the laundries during that trip, and the family had no idea, so they started to dig through their pictures and videos, and they found a picture where you clearly see the laundry's camper right next to theirs. And in one photo there is a picture of the 4 adults, and in the distance you see a man walking towards the laundry camper who definitely resembles or is Brian Laundrie. And if so, this would be the last picture taken of Brian after he had returned, but before he took off. Now, all these other pictures floating around of people saying, is this Brian Laundrie? Is this Brian Laundrie? None of them look like Brian Laundrie to me. This picture looked like Brian to me. So I think this was the last image of him. And I need to do another update on the timeline, another video of an updated timeline. I did one about a week ago. And I'm really starting to wonder what happened between the incident on the 12th that evening until he allegedly went home, according to Gabby's mother, on the 17th. What was the real reason he did this? And did he in fact fly, or did he drive? He was gone from the 17th to the 24th. That's 6 or 7 days, depending on when he left and the time. He could have driven home and back. And if he did, that means he would have left her behind with no transportation. Is this why her dad ordered pizza for her at the hotel on the 21st? What was she doing during that time? That's almost a whole week, or was a whole week, depending. And it didn't seem like they had the funds for her to stay in a hotel the night of the 12th. I mean, Brian got a hotel because of the officers, and she was given the van and told of where she can go take a shower. You think if she had funds, she would have said, I'm going to go get a hotel room. But at the same time, the credit card that Brian used where he has a warrant for his arrest, most of us are assuming was hers because it mentions a PIN being used. And it was in an amount over $1,000, so it does seem like she had money. So why didn't she go to a hotel that night? And a hotel for an entire week is a decent amount of money. And if she still had $1,000 left over in the account after that, then they did have money for both of them to stay in a hotel on the 12th, but in separate hotels. And did she stay in that van that night? Or did she get herself a hotel? We don't know. We know they were seen leaving the hotel in Salt Lake City, and then they stopped in Ogden, which was her last social media post. And then on the 25th, her mom, last spoke with her on the phone. The 26th, a few witnesses claimed to have seen Brian, but none of those witnesses make much sense because there's multiple different locations, not near any, but each other. And 2 out of the 3 said that he was alone, acting strange and agitated. But the 3rd witness said he was with her and they seemed happy. So those conflict, those stories. This 27th is a huge point or day in this case. But I really wish we can fill in the night of the 12th until the 27th better. These 15 days after the incident leading up to her death are super important in my opinion. How did this escalate so quickly? What was transpiring? Where were they? Was there other altercations, but nobody had witnessed it? Or maybe they witnessed it and we just haven't heard about it yet. Why did Brian nor Gabby mention to the officers on the scene that day that Brian had plans to return home to Florida for a period of time in a few days, where they would have given each other a break? Like, officer, you're right, and we're going to be getting a break soon because he's going home. That wasn't mentioned. It wasn't mentioned he was going to Florida and they would be getting a break from either Brian or Gabby, and that to me tells me that his trip on the 17th back to Florida was not a planned thing. I just think they would have mentioned it as a way to say we're going to be having a break from one another. And how is it that they did get this break from each other for almost a week, and he gets back and it ends up with her being dead within 3 to 4 days, depending on when she was killed, which is definitely looking more like she was killed on the 27th. We just don't know for sure yet. There's so many questions, so many unknowns. This whole period of time is so scattered with information that we need to fill in. It's crazy. And I just give it to me. Tell me all of it. I need to know. But as always in cases, we may never know, or we may not know for quite some time, unfortunately, and we just have to wait. As of now, at the time of this recording, nothing is going on. We will see how the day progresses, and I will come back tonight or tomorrow morning with another update for those of you who can't keep up with all the groups and all the outlet stories and what have you. Until next time.